legacy Christian and the Great Commission that Jesus gave to the disciples and subsequently to us. In Matthew 28, this is what Jesus said to the disciples right before he ascended to heaven. This was like his last instruction to his disciples. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. I want us to be able to raise up small group leaders who will be able to confidently declare the gospel to the people who would come and partake in what we have going on here. So that is our ultimate goal. We wish to be biblically critical thinkers. There is a culture out there. There is a pseudo-Christian culture as well as the secular culture that are pushing up ideas that people are hearing, and their minds and their hearts are being taken with some of these ideas. If we can be biblical critical thinkers and we can raise biblically critical thinkers, they can hear ideas and they can engage with them biblically. And I think that's where I believe, this is a gospel according to John Rudd, not John the Apostle. I believe that if we can engage intellectually, then we can engage people's hearts and we can change them from the inside and out. All right, our minds also need to be transformed. And I think that we're in an era, we're in an age where the mind becomes the God. The mind becomes the idol. And so what makes sense to me winds up becoming the God that I worship. And so I think that our ability to make real explanations from the gospel will help people's hearts be changed. We've been through 6 modules so far. We started off building that foundation around doctrine and theology, understanding that our doctrine is designed to rebut error, to address error in thinking, error in understanding by citing Scripture, pointing people back to the gospel. Not great wisdom, not great ideas, not eloquent speeches, but the Word of God. And so we begin there with a firm understanding of the doctrine and the theology of the orthodoxy of our faith. Then we step into preparing a word, whether that word is a Bible study, whether that word is a tithe message, whether that word is a sermon on a Sunday morning. We use basically we interpret the text on the page, understanding its context, pairing that context with what we understand about doctrine and theology as represented across the whole of the Bible, and then we present that word, what it says on the page. We were just joking about some great sermons that have been preached out of this pulpit over time. And that challenge that we might feel as it's coming up to be our turn. I got to preach in a couple of weeks. I need to write a good word. All right? And this isn't a rebuke, but it's a challenge. You don't need to write a good word. A good word has been written. And all I got to do is highlight that good word that's written on the page. I'm completely free to preach anything in the Bible. I don't have to write any. We play this game like open it up and find a verse that speaks to you. I'm telling you, you could open up the Word and you could find a verse that speaks to you and you could preach that. When we understand the gospel, when we understand the change that has happened in our lives, I can preach anything because it points back to Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ will change somebody's life. If they hear it and they don't accept it, the Word tells us that's going to happen, and that's okay. It's not on me and it's not on you to preach the Word that's going to change somebody's life. It's on me and you to highlight the truth of the gospel. Let the Holy Spirit do the work. Amen. And so now we're on to some practical applications of how we want to put this thing together. We are in the third section, and all we're really doing is highlighting some ideas that a Christian author has put down over years of studying church organizations. And so we've kind of come through the foundation. We've come through the practical, some of the practical techniques for presenting the word. And now we're really just talking about structure of an organization as explained by a person who has studied Christian organizations. There are some places where the ideas overlap with things we've experienced in business and in life and in schools, right? And then there are some things that are really unique to a faith organization, some problems, and we're going to talk about a bunch of that today. One part being volunteers. Completely different deal if I hire you to do a print job for me, right? If I've hired you to do a print job, you are printing, I am paying. It's a very, very simple relationship. If I have volunteered to help you do worship, it's a completely different exchange, right? And so there's some nuances to faith organizations that require us to lead slightly differently. And so we're through module 6. Today is module 7. Last week we talked planning. Today we're going to talk about leading. And really, you're going to see that it's about organizational structure, shape of organizations, and how to make the organization work well internally. Okay, and so we'll get there. Just the overall summary. I realized as I checked out my slides, I wrote STEAM line. I don't know if any of you guys are like read the word on the page and like that's not what that says, people. I'm an ideas person. I'm not necessarily an editing person. And so as I was preparing the slides for this week, I'm like, why is that highlighted? That doesn't say what I think that says. So I updated a few of my slides, partially because I can't spell. The overall summary, reminding, so to kind of reorient ourselves on the book that we're talking about right now. The author points out that health is hard. Blundering into a healthy organization just isn't mathematically a real thing. Okay, I'm sure there are organizations that have blundered into health. I feel like my marriage blundered into health. I think we all know for real, Jesus changed our hearts. We didn't come into it with a strategy that was healthy, right? We all come into associations with baggage and ideas. And so all of those things, expectations and desires and hopes, all of those things kind of come together and they tend to make a stew that is not healthy, just on a natural way. And so we need to make systems to try to pursue health. There is a matter of human terrain and that is all of that stuff that we show up with personally that can make things challenging, right? Different personalities, different values, different upbringings and backgrounds can make for problems in communication and in interaction. And so we've got to be sensitive to that. We've got to appreciate that there are reasons for people's involvement in an organization. When it's just the business deal, I'm going to come in and be a printmaker for Pastor Daryl. It's a very clear understanding of what's going to go on. I'm going to make prints for him. He's going to pay me this many dollars an hour. The expectations are there. I've got so many jobs to get done each day, so on and so forth, right? We can write these things down in very clear ways. In an organization like this, people will join for a variety of different reasons. People walk through the door on Sunday morning for a variety of different reasons. People, we want to believe that people commit themselves to church for the exact same reason that we do, but that's not a reality. People volunteer for things for a variety of different reasons. Their motivations can be different. Sometimes different is good. Sometimes different isn't good, right? And so we need to be aware of that and sensitive to that. Good systems don't naturally happen in church just because we all love Jesus. First of all, to assume that everybody who walks in loves Jesus is a bad assumption. Second of all, to assume that simply because we all love Jesus, let's, as charitably as we can, everybody who walked through the door this morning is completely devoted to Jesus. All right? Simply because of that, it doesn't mean that everything is going to work flawlessly, right? Good systems will help us solve problems. Good systems are related to success. Good systems lead to better decisions. We were just talking about, so last week we talked about scheduling. Pastor Pio just pointed out that something that has sort of resonated with him is the importance of study. In his study this past week, over what he was going to teach this week, he was able to identify some things that he had not identified previously, right? So going back to last week's discussion about scheduling and understanding scheduling as a system, if we have scheduled well and we've crafted a preaching series, a preaching timeline, a preaching schedule, well, now the next person who's going to preach can already be working on their piece. So it's not the Saturday before, like I confessed to you all last week. It's not the Saturday before trying to put the final touches on it, but it is in preparation and in cooperation with the Holy Spirit to find those pearls that are already on the page. If I've got the time to study, then I have the time to see the things to highlight. I don't have to find the great phrases or the great the great terminology. I don't have to write the good sermon. I just have time to marinate on the Word and to study the Word and to see those things that if I rewind time from that passage 2 months, we've got a man being raised from the dead, and now this sacrifice is completely clear. It totally makes sense. Right? That's what we get with good scheduling. That's what we get with good systems. It saves us money. All right? I can buy my way out of problems, or I can work my way out of problems. I usually need time to work my way out of problems. If I haven't given myself time, then I'm going to have to buy my way out of problems or let the problems stop me, right? And so there we go. 3 major parts. And the biggest, and again, the last major introduction point is that our biggest problems we can fix for free because we fix them right here amongst each other. Right in here, the solution to 99.9% of the problems that face Legacy Christian, the solutions are in the room right now. And so our 3 big parts: planning, leading, communicating. All right, we got through planning last week. We agreed that planning and scheduling is important. It's not easy. It's not always convenient. It's not always tidy, but it's important. And if we don't do it, then we can't get people to the place to do the thing, to reach the unchurched, to respond as the church, and to release the church into the surrounding community, right? And so we've got to be able to plan. Once we have planned, then we got to be able to lead. And so that's where we're at for this week, all right? You can see the bullets up there. We're going to roll down through these things. Once again, we are summarizing a book. I think Pastor Pio handed out some books last week. I would challenge you all to work through them in your own time, to look at them with that critical eye, right? So we want to be biblically critical thinkers. I would take that a step further to say, we just want to be critical thinkers. I think that we want to be able to look at stuff. We want to see their ideas, and we want to see what applies and what doesn't, what's useful and what isn't, what's good ideas and what, I don't totally agree with that, right? Just because we're working with this book, it's not the gospel, right? There's some stuff in there that doesn't apply to us. There's some stuff in there that would revolutionize us. And so being able to identify those things and not throw it out because there are points that don't 100% apply. There we go. Not throwing it out because there are points that don't 100% apply, but then also not taking it on as well, it's in the book. We need to do this, right? You all know this church much better than Mike does. Mike doesn't know a thing about Legacy Christian, but he knows a thing about some Christian organizations, okay? So let's get after it. We're in part 2 of his book, and it is it's all about leadership, okay? The first major bullet that he talks about within leadership is the idea of an organizational chart. All right, this is an organizational chart that I threw together after a meeting a couple of weeks ago with Pastor Pio. I don't mean this to be. I don't know that this is necessarily a perfect representation of our organization, but really it's a working PowerPoint slide that we can shift things around. The point of the organizational chart is that it helps us understand who is in charge of what. Then we can get the right people involved in the right problems, right? I would say as I look at our organization, if I was going to be critical of how we are organized, I see 2 people on the chart that almost everything flows through. And so what that does is that burdens those 2 people with almost everything that we do. And so that makes for a situation where things can get dropped. There is a matter of, within organizations, there is a matter of decision rights. All right, so organizations will talk about decision rights. Who within the organization has the authority to make decisions? All right, if you have singular entities with sole decision rights, then that means that every single decision has to flow through them. And so if it's a small organization with few interests, that can work, right? In my household, I'm the primary person with decision rights. All right, that's not to say that Tammy doesn't get to make decisions. She makes a ton of decisions all the time, But when it comes to like major purchase, so I'm the sole breadwinner for my home. So any major purchase, she winds up deferring to me. So I have decision rights on that. We're 5 people, right? I can have decision rights on major purchases for 5 people. We were just talking about the Hunt organization earlier. We're talking about thousands and thousands of employees spread across the U.S. There's not a singular financial president with decision rights on major purchases for Hunt. It's impossible. All right. What I would get at in discussing the org chart here, and again, not to say that I think this is a perfect representation of the organizational chart, but if this is an adequate or a mostly clear example of the organizational chart, I would challenge us to consider what problems do we create by having narrow decision rights. All right, and that's not to say that I think everybody should make financial decisions. Everybody should make printing decisions or musical decisions, right? But there are areas where we probably should be making decisions on our own that we shouldn't be pushing through Pastor Pio, informing him, not necessarily having him make the decision for us. And then there are probably areas that definitely need to sit with these 2 men. They definitely need to be the ones to make the choice, right? And so being able to sort that out is the key, is really what the organizational chart discussion drives at. Making sure that responsibility and authority are centered in the right locations, and that we don't bog down the wrong people with the wrong responsibilities, right? And so that's really the point for us to consider our organizational chart. If it's just one line, all straight up through 1 or 2 people, and no one else makes decisions, then we'll get into 2 situations. One, decisions will never get made, right? We'll talk about stuff, and we'll come up with great ideas, but we'll never get to the decision point. Because then ultimately the execution and the decision are isolated from each other, right? And so we'll talk about it. Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea, but there's never really a firm execute decision made, right? Or things will get done outside of the appropriate decision-making channels, and then the right people won't be involved, and then we'll be off the schedule that we discussed from last week, right? We won't be able to get things published in time. We won't be able to get the word out in time. We won't be able to make the announcements in time because we're making decisions late, because the singular person making the decisions has been bogged down with 100 other things before they could really sort through this decision. And so then we wind up in the Marines, we call it the closest alligator to the boat, where we're just dealing with this immediate threat. There are 10 other alligators lined up. I can't deal with alligator number 10 right now because I'm constantly dealing with the alligator right at the edge of my boat, right? That's what we create by having a bottleneck. I absolutely think that there are decisions that belong at the absolute leadership. I think that there are other decisions that belong down at the lower level. Being able to sort between those is kind of part of that mature leadership. Being able to say, yeah, this is above my pay grade. Let me talk to Pastor Darrell. Let me talk to Pastor Pio on this, right? Getting the right people involved in the right problems is critical to the organizational chart. All right, employee handbook. All right, this is very business language, right? We've probably all gotten a job somewhere and gotten some packet of information that gives us things like vision statements and missions and values, processes, responsibilities, sort of general concepts that apply to the whole of the business. I think my first job was at McDonald's, and I got stuff like this to be a person. Well, you don't even actually flip burgers. You close this clamshell thing, and it cooks it from both sides. To be a dude cooking burgers on both sides, I got a booklet like this, right? I think that this exists here at Legacy. I think that we have a handbook that frames out information about the organization, about the structure of the organization. I think that the handbook exists that talks about core values, that talks about vision, that talks about mission. We also talk about it collectively. And so that exists. I think that, we've had some important discussions in recent history. I remember Pastor Roz bringing up, okay, so I think we were talking core values, and there was some dialogue over, okay, but how does that actually apply, right? And so I think that something for us to consider in this larger discussion about handbook is, Do we have these values? Do we understand how these values apply to us? Is it appropriate over time to sort of update and adjust our some of these statements that we hold dear to who we are? I would say that COVID has taught us a lot of things. I think that our vision has probably shifted. I don't think that our vision is wrong. I don't disagree with our vision. But I think that our vision has matured. I think that some of our values have matured. And so it's not a matter of striking lines through things. This doesn't matter anymore. It's not a matter of this was wrong, this was never right. I think that as an organization matures, our perspective on the world matures. I think that in the last year, we have all grown in ways that may change a little bit of how we look at things and how we want to do business. And so that's an interesting part of the overall employee handbook. What is it that we say about ourselves, and does all of that still apply? It's kind of like when we talked last week about evaluating our regular events, our regularly scheduled event, right? Is it still doing what we meant for it to do? Because we meant for it to carry out the mission. And so as we're evaluating our events and our gatherings and so forth, we're really evaluating them against the mission. Likewise, I think we can evaluate the employee handbook, the handbook, for that same purpose. Is it still accurate? Is it still accurate to the mission? I think that the mission is still solid. I think the mission is still firm. I think that our strategy for carrying out the mission has matured. And that's really what I'm driving at. And so I think that there's probably space in there for us to keep that sharp. The hiring process, all right? Again, this is very business language, but I think that it's language that we need to engage with. How do we identify what we need, right? If Pastor Darrell is going to hire me to be a print guy for him, well, first he needed to identify, I need some help. I need somebody in here to come and print for me, right? How do we identify what we need here at Legacy? And then how do we recruit those people? How do we get the right people to do the right job? Do we assign things by default? There's nobody else to do it, but we need to do it? I think we do sometimes. I think Children's Church is a great example of a ministry that has kind of, we got to get somebody to do it, right? And it's tough. This is not a rebuke or anything like that. I don't want to lead Children's Church. I am mad, right? It's hard, and it's a problem for every church. I doubt there is a pastor, unless they've got some unique people that really love that. I can remember a lady at a church I went to in North Carolina that really loved ministering to children, and so that's a unicorn, right? She was really called to ministering to children, and so that was a wonderful thing. Well, how do we find her? Her name is Amy Toth. How do we find her? How do we find that person? Because those people are out there. Position descriptions versus job descriptions, right? How do we conceptualize the things that we do, right? Each of us fulfills a role here at Legacy Christian. We were functionally, whether practically or otherwise, we were functionally hired for a job, right? We were assigned to a position to do a specific task, right? Sort of, in a manner of speaking. We have all gotten jobs before that were very clear on what our job was. We probably all gotten jobs before where it was kind of described this way. And then we got into the job, and there were a few other pieces that weren't on the brochure, right? Does that happen here? Yeah. Yeah. Now, for a lot of us, I think that we serve out of abundance, out of that full awareness of a resurrected spirit. And so when there's an additional, man, I didn't think that was going to happen, we can cope with it pretty well most of the time. At some point, we become task saturated. At some point, we become distracted. But I think most of us sitting in the room right now are serving out of an abundant heart and have space to have grace for each other when something gets asked that I really wasn't planning on that, right? At some point, we get to our breaking point. How does that work for new volunteers? It's a lot tougher, right? We're all dedicated to the organization, and so if I got to flex a little bit, frankly, I'm serving out of abundance. I have a lot of personal loyalty to Pastor Pio and Pastor Daryl. And so if they ask me to do something that I hadn't really been planning on, I have some space in my heart to do it. For a new volunteer, the first week I was volunteering, there was less space in my heart for that, right? I thought I knew what I had signed on for, I think that it's something that we've really got to consider. And so I guess I just want to push to you, in a traditional job, pay is the motivator, right? We'll stay with the print shop worker. Pay is the motivator. As long as Pastor Daryl is paying me to make the prints, I'm gonna make the prints, right? That's not the circumstance for most of us here. I wasn't paid to do the act this week. I wasn't paid to preach the last couple of weeks. I'm not getting paid for this class right now, right? This is a volunteer. This is a volunteer thing. I believe I'm doing it. I believe I'm doing it out of obedience. I think that if I'm not active in what God has called me to do, then I think that I'm living in rebellion. And so I'm doing it out of obedience. I think that we need to appreciate that people serving out of obedience have different motivations. And so leverage is different, right? If I'm working as the print shop guy and I don't show up, well, you can fire me, right? I don't know the right answer. I don't have a right answer, and the book doesn't have a right answer for what to do when somebody who is at least ostensibly working out of obedience is not meeting the standard. I think it's something we got to work with. I think that it's something we've got to try to understand. How do we critique well? How do we fix problems, right? Everything running smooth, super easy, drama-free. When things are not running smoothly, how do we navigate that human terrain with volunteers who are at least generally serving out of obedience, but probably with some other motivations, right? I'm getting college credit for this. So for me to just bail on it today, man, you know what? I just want to go home, right? There are other consequences. I wouldn't have completed my internship, right? And so how do we navigate that when something doesn't go right? I think that a part of it is, on the one hand, appreciating why do our volunteers volunteer, and then on the other hand, understanding their motivations for their kind of second and third order motivations for volunteering. Leadership is not easy. It's the concept or the context that I lead in the Marines. Most of my guys very motivated, very capable, very intelligent. Those people are very easy to lead. We share general, and there's money involved. If they mess up, our boss can take their money away. So there's a carrot and a stick, right? We're not even talking about carrots and sticks when we're talking about leading volunteers. It's a completely different animal. And so I think that we just need to be aware of that. I think if we start by being aware of our own motivations and then really getting to know our people, then we understand what is their motivation. Then we can kind of see, when are they having a hard time? When are the distractions of life, the busyness of life, distract or limiting their ability to serve? Think about the grace that you can offer if you know that that's happening. If you know that that person is having a really hard time right now, and you tell them, hey, you know what? I'm going to cover. Jen has had a terrible week because we have a relationship, and I know that. You know what? I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover the entry next Sunday. Why don't you just chill at home with Kevin, watch it online, relax a little bit, recharge. Think about the grace in that, rather than like, yo, where was Jen at? It's Sunday. She knows she's supposed to be here. Who's going to do the thing? She had a rough week. Whatever. Like, think about the difference in that grace. If we know that, if we've established that communication and that network within the team, and now we release people from responsibilities. So one, they knew that they had all agreed what their responsibility was, but we release them from that, knowing that there are distractions and there are challenges. I'm just suggesting some leadership ideas that can help us navigate this stuff instead of this like unspoken, unmet expectations. If we can kind of flatten out the terrain a little bit and appreciate that volunteering is hard, volunteerism is hard, and leading volunteers is hard, is a part of that. All right. In order to do so, we've got to look at roles, which kind of brings us back around to the organizational chart. it's easy for us as individuals to drift from our mission, from our vision, and from the things that matter most when our roles aren't clear, right? When I'm just sort of like bouncing around within the organizational structure without tasks and responsibilities, then we kind of just start doing stuff. And we may be doing this stuff with nothing but a heart full of goodness. But then things wind up being left undone, right? If I am thinking that Jen is going to be at the front door, but Jen isn't really assigned to the front door, that's not really what she's responsible for. That's just sort of a sideline. Well, then it's really easy for the front door to all of a sudden not be covered, right? And I think we've seen that. I think we've had Sundays where people are just sort of like, well, I thought, but here we go. I'm jumping in and doing that now, right? I think that each of those, coming back around to that organizational chart and moving those blocks around as necessary to make a more accurate representation. I think that we've got to. I think that if we truly understand our primary responsibilities and tasks, then we're a little bit better organized to know who is supposed to do what, and then who might be available to be brought in, who ought to be considered. Should we be relieving Jen because it's been a rough month, right? If those roles and responsibilities are clearly lined out, then we at least have some general principles or sort of a baseline from which to start making these other decisions. Each of those, and this is where it starts to get into the business discussion of things, but if we can appreciate that we've all been pseudo-hired or at least plugged in to a position to do a thing, truly there is a thing having been done well or a thing having been done poorly. How do we evaluate that? All right. I'm not advocating, and I don't think that Mike is advocating, like punitive disciplinarian, like that. Like that's not the point. But we've got to be able to define. Every organization has got to be able to define the difference between wins and losses. We've got to have, people need to know, are they doing well? The only way for me to evaluate you on whether, and I'm saying me, the only way for us to evaluate ourselves, the only way for Pastor Pio to evaluate our performance is to have a defined role. And then we can say, did we do well on this, or could we have done better on this? If we never know where we are, I have this observation. People who are unevaluated go one of two ways, and it's bad either way. They either convince themselves that they're water walkers, absolutely everything they do is perfect, or they think that they're a complete failure and I'm not even being evaluated because they're so frustrated with me, right? Personalities tend to divide out that way. It's rare for a person to be able to sort of evaluate themselves and be kind of self-soothing, self-feeding, self-critiquing. And so our personalities will go wide one way or the other. Both of them are bad, right? If I think that I am completely flawless, I could never make a mistake, that's a recipe for disaster. If I'm walking on eggshells because I don't think anything I do is ever right, that's also a disaster. You're gonna create those people that'll never make a decision. I don't know if we should turn on the lights. I'm not. Hey, Pastor, should we turn on the lights for the sanctuary, or are we gonna do it in the dark today, or no? I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Right? If we don't know our roles, if we don't know if we don't have some ability to, if we don't have some ability to define and to critique, then we're going to wander, we're going to drift, and we're not going to be successful. We're going to struggle. We've got to know what's our personal responsibility. If I know what my responsibilities are, and I know what Pastor Daryl's responsibilities are, and I know what David's responsibilities are, and I see that, well, we're within 5 minutes. Oh, David had to run back to the bathroom. Let me click the button. It's not my responsibility, but I know that it needs to happen, right? So I know that I need to be over here getting ready to do the welcome, right? I know that Pastor Daryl needs to be up there getting ready to play. I know that David is supposed to be at the computer getting ready to kick it off, but if all of a sudden his stomach got messed up, it's probably better for him to be back in the bathroom than sitting in the chair, right? And so now if I understand all of those roles, and I know what's supposed to happen, and I know how it's supposed to work, and then something weird happens, I know where I can jump in and help to make sure the thing goes right. But that only comes out of knowing roles. If I didn't know who was supposed to be at the computer, maybe we're not doing that countdown today. I don't know. Right? We've got to have some framework. So it's not an argument for this like rigid, that's not my job. Right? That's not the point. That's not the point. We're a volunteer organization that loves each other. If we understand roles, and then I know that Jen had a bad week, I know the role has to be filled. So let me jump in there because I got time. I don't need to do anything until the announcements anyway. I can chill out there and welcome people, shoot them in the head with the thing, right? I can do that. I got some weird skills, y'all. All right. A part of that, a part of the roles and responsibilities that he argues, and I think it's interesting, is to have a tweetable job description. All right. I think we've kind of joked around it. None of these are jobs, right? This isn't my job, but I've got a responsibility right now to present it right now. I'm fulfilling a responsibility. An agreement that we made with Regent University, I'm fulfilling right now. I can make a tweetable, and so I think you can only tweet like 140 characters. His point is that a concise description of your job is critical. I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Einstein said that if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it. We ought to be able to distill our responsibilities down to a fairly concise explanation. And if we can do that, if we can distill our role down to this concise explanation, now we've got kind of the beginnings of that baseline that we might deviate from. But I know what I'm supposed to do. I might jump in to help over here if I need to push the button or take the temperature or pass the basket, right? I could jump in and do that stuff, but I know baseline, this is what they're counting on me for. And then once that baseline is well established and I really understand it, then I know how much more can I take on when appropriate, right? We've talked about it before. If I take over Jen's job, she's doing it out of the abundance of her heart. She's doing it as a part of her own personal discipleship, right? So I don't want to cut her out. I want her to be able to come and join. I want new people to be able to fit in and do things. I don't want to hold anybody out. But if I understand my job well, I also understand where I could bring somebody on to help, right? I probably, a new person, I probably don't want them to give, I don't want them to present the word, but they might be able to say welcome, right? They could probably do announcements. I'm probably going to protect like doctrinal, theological things a little bit further. But if somebody was called to teach and had the gift of gab or whatever you want to say, I could make room in the act for somebody else. Absolutely. If I know my role, I know what I can bring them into. Tweetable job description. Okay. With our roles, we need to have goals, right? And we talked about it. We talked about it a few weeks ago. It was really curious. He uses fundamentally the SMART goals model for making goals, right? So each role ought to have goals that it wants to accomplish. And then that sort of feeds into our evaluation model. Are we successful? Are we not successful? And so what do we remember about the SMART goals? It's an acronym. Do we remember what they are? Somebody Google it real quick. SMART goals.
Specific, measurable, attainable,
realistic,
time.
There we go. It's super simple. And so really the idea is to make our goals something to, if I can make a tweetable job description, I ought to be able to make a tweetable goal. And you ought to know what it is. My goal is to screen every person coming through. I don't care if you're Pastor Pio. I don't care if you're a new person. My goal is to screen everybody as they come through the door, have them documented so we have the necessary COVID, the necessary COVID callback stuff, and do it in a warm way so they don't feel like they're getting shaken down by the Gestapo when they're coming into church, right? It's a simple goal. It's a super simple goal. I know the goal. My goal in this class is to adequately summarize this author's points on leading within an organization. That's my goal. It's that simple. So I'm going to highlight the key points. I'm going to try to open it up for thought, and I'm trying to make an exercise that's useful. I got to have goals. We got to have leadership development, all right? It's not simply enough to plug people into spots for them to have fingers in the dam, right? That's not enough. We have to be, and I think as a goal, the strategy that we've laid out demands that we're raising up leaders. I argue that discipleship means raising people up to replace you. For the body of Christ to multiply, that means there need to be more pastors. That means there need to be more church staff. There needs to be more worship teams. There needs to be more technical teams. There needs to be more door greeters and kitchen people and everything. Children's workers, all of it. And so that means that we have to be raising up. We have to have some model, some method for developing leaders. I've said it 100 times and I stand by it. I'm convinced of it, that if I am not raising people up to replace me, I am actively impeding people's spiritual growth. If they are called to be a minister and I hold them at arm's length because, well, I'm the minister, I am impeding God's call on that person's life. I don't want to be accountable for that. I've pulled enough dumb stuff on my own. I don't need that. I don't want that. I don't want us to do that. And so we've got to have some kind of a model, to develop leaders. That doesn't mean that everybody is being groomed to be a new senior pastor. It means that we're looking at our people in managing talent, right? Understanding what a person is called to and nurturing that call. If God put that call in your heart, if God put that call in their heart, I want to nurture that. Just like I want to highlight the truth on the page, I want to nurture what God has put in their heart. I don't want to stymie it. I don't want to prevent it. I don't want to try to make them do something that they're not called to. I want to nurture what God has called them. So I've got to manage talent. I've got to have plans to achieve those goals. I have to have some structure within each place within that organizational chart to bring people up. I've got to be looking at my people, looking for those future leaders within this nuanced portion of ministry. A great way to do that is to have some concept of resources. A great way to raise up leaders is through what's being poured into them. And so we have to have some concept of resources that help us in our various ministries. If you wanted to talk about teaching, if you wanted to talk about doctrine, if you wanted to talk about church history and context and commentary, I have a wide range of resources that have been really, really productive to me. If you all take this call that's been placed on your life and take it seriously to understand it well, you will find resources as you study. YouTube is full of stuff. You can learn anything on YouTube, to include preaching, to include biblical interpretation. You can find a bunch of junk on there too. But there are resources everywhere. And so I would encourage you, as we're considering this leadership development model, looking for those resources that grow you personally. This is a great example. This is a leadership development resource that Pastor Pio came across. It summarizes, it captures a bunch of ideas that he and I were having hours and hours of conversations about. And you flip in there like, oh shoot, I wish I had said it like that. That's way better. It's a leadership resource. And so whatever element you are a part of, even, believe it or not, even COVID procedures for churches, there are resources out there that give great ideas on how to do it well. How to do children's church in engaging ways. Massive resources that span the gambit of entertainment through deep discipleship, right? I think this way, it would be, but I'm not in charge of children's church. There are resources out there. As leaders, a part of leadership, I would submit to you, is gathering ideas about those resources. So when that person is coming up and they want to hear something, you can disciple them personally, but you can also point them to resources that they can study on. Now you've got some subject matter, and we can really talk about this. We can really talk about what challenged you in that book, right? If you've read it and I've read it, now as a team, we can come together and we can say, look, I'm giving you a summary, but that's nothing. Right? It just sensitizes you to what's in the book. If you've read it and I've read it, we've done this a couple of times. We're talking over something that jumped out at us from the book. Oh, no kidding. Well, look I saw this thing and I got to highlight it over here, and then I wrote that. So now we're exchanging these ideas, and it's maturing both of us as leaders, using those resources to guide those discussions, and then to challenge each other with ideas. Great way to help develop leaders who are going to come up to replace us. Scheduled evaluations are a critical part of each of these roles, of each of these pockets, right? Most businesses have some evaluation model. I get an evaluation at least once a year where my boss sits me down, grades me against like 12 different categories, evaluates my job description versus my job performance, tells me how I'm doing. And then his boss makes additional comments on how my performance has been. It's critical for us to be able to coach our people. The whole point of an evaluation is not about criticism, but rather it's about coaching, right? If we have some model where we are able to sit down and talk about what's going right and what's going wrong, then we're able to coach and be coached through challenges. If no evaluation model comes down, then it always becomes correcting a problem, right? We're not going to sit down and talk about it until the wheels have fallen off, until some event has gone sideways and everybody's mad, until something requires us to do that, right? So much better to talk about problems while they're small, to sort through issues before they've had negative consequences, right? That's the point of having the scheduled evaluation. People need to know how they're doing. And it's better to have the conversation before a disaster has emerged. If we only evaluate, if we only solve problems when the building is on fire, then we're failing to plan, and we're creating problems for ourselves. Now all of a sudden we're going to be buying our way out of issues, whether that's with money or with time or with loss of talent, right? Second to last point, meeting system. I think that we've got a great meeting system. I think that we have a good routine for meetings. I think that we generally know when our meetings are going to happen. I think that we always have to challenge ourselves to make our meetings fruitful. Mr. L, right? I'm not going to try to pronounce that last name. It's that simple. I don't know if you guys have noticed as I'm talking about him, I keep kind of beating around his name because I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. Mr. L makes a couple of great points, just sort of a summary of what he sees as a good meeting. He points out reviewing the numbers, and so whatever those numbers are, stats, money, dates, whatever the numbers are, reviewing those so everybody knows the important numbers associated with whatever it is we're trying to answer. Wins and losses, what went right and what went wrong. We got to be able to talk about that privately and publicly, right? Acting like everything went right when everybody knows it didn't go right is so demoralizing. We do it in the Marine Corps all the time. Try to paint it with rose-colored glasses. Everybody's like, that exercise was a disaster. And this colonel is up here patting us on the back, telling us how great it was. We were not watching the same exercise, right? We've all had things like, that went pretty well. Excellent. We've all had some things like, that was good. That probably wouldn't have done it that way, right? We got to be able to have that conversation. If everybody in the room is like, I probably shouldn't have done it that way, then as a leader, we need to take ownership. We probably shouldn't have done it that way. So here's my guidance on how we're going to do it better next time. Okay. Previous goals relative to future goals, right? So if we talked last week about the benefit of repetition. If we've done something before and we had a solid on it, then as we're getting ready to do it again, right? We got a Jericho prayer walk coming up. We've done a couple of them. while I've been here. We've probably learned some lessons from how we organized it, all of that. We can take those lessons into the meeting to make sure that our execution is going to reflect those lessons learned, right? He talks about working with a couple of big rocks, not dozens of small rocks. And so what he means by that is, for each meeting, everybody only has so much bandwidth, right? I've already bored a few people in this class. Some of the other stuff I taught was a little more dynamic. This is a little less dynamic. This stuff is a lot headier, right? We're just really talking about things like conceptually, right? And so it's really easy to get lost in this. And so I've actually got, what have I got, like 6 or 10 different little rocks kind of in this summary. If I had only talked about 2 of these things in great detail, you probably would have come out of this class with a much richer understanding of those things, right? I'm doing the opposite of what he taught right now. If in a meeting we handled just a couple of big rocks, we're talking about the near alligators, right? I've got to be planning against the far alligators, but dealing with the near alligators, right? I've got to do the thing that's coming. Easter is coming next, y'all. I've got to do Easter next. But there are a number of other events that follow on after Easter. If I'm planning for them while preparing to execute this because it's already planned, then I'm doing well. So if I have a meeting this week, we don't have a meeting this week, right?
No,
Council has a meeting this week. If we're going to have a meeting this week, we would just handle the big rocks of Easter. Regular meetings and retreats. We've got regular meetings, which are designed to get us on the, are designed to handle the near alligators. Something that he advises, and I think is a place where we could grow, is regular retreats. So if the meeting is to handle the alligators nearest to the boat, the retreats are designed for us to unify and solidify as a team. As a mainlander, I can tell you, you all are perfectly positioned for retreats. We could go down to Kailua Beach right now and have a wonderful afternoon retreat, refreshing each other and enjoying each other, playing music and singing on the beach, playing in the water. We could have a wonderful retreat in 15 minutes, right? We're in a great place for it. I would encourage us, I would challenge us to consider that. We do a lot of meetings. We do a lot of work together. Finding those times to link our arms together also helps enrich the team. And that's probably one of the most glaring things from this section that I think we have the capacity for and would benefit from. Good calendar and communication results in simple regular meetings, right? It's really easy for a meeting to be 2 hours long, and then you leave the meeting and say, man, I don't even know what we did. I don't even know what happened. If we've got a good calendar and we've got good communication, then we're all showing up in the meeting with all the same information, and then we're able to just handle the big rocks because we already know what the big rocks are. We satisfy the problems associated with those. Meeting's done. Let's roll, right? If we can do that, a short meeting that handles all the problems is better than a long meeting that I don't even know what happened, right? If we could get it done in 30 minutes, and then I mean, we can spend the other hour and a half just joking around, whatever it is we need to do. I think that recognizing time as a resource is critical. All right, and then if we think about our regular meetings as confirmation of what we already know rather than creation. So decision by committee is so painful. It's so difficult because everybody's got different ideas. If we've done the organizational chart well, if we understand our roles and responsibilities well, if we've distributed decision rights appropriately, then when we come together in a group, we can just confirm what we already know as opposed to trying to create within committee. Creating in committee either winds up in 10 of us have 10 different ideas, or 9 of us listen to one person just come up with ideas on their own, right? That fundamentally, that's what it comes down to. And so you don't have any of the benefit of multiple minds because it's the best ideas that one person can come up with, or you never get to a decision because nobody agrees on the method. So having the right people in the small meeting to make the decision, then to do coordination with the other right people, then in the large meeting, we can just confirm, I'm doing the coordination with the outside churches. Pastor Luke has got the sound locked on. Auntie Jen has got the ladies for the kitchen. Pastor Roz has got the check-in people. All right, Youth Unite's ready to roll. Next. Right? If we've done that coordination, if we've done all that planning and that preparation, if the schedule has been right, if I know the right people to ask to have the kitchen set, then I don't have to wait until I'm in committee to try to get answers on it. And now in committee, everybody can say, like, okay, cool. So you just need people to high five kids in the lobby. I'm there, right? Everybody can see where they fit in because the major problems are already solved. If we want to use the meeting for confirmation. All right. Final bullet. We're done, I promise. Is job descriptions, and this really goes back to roles, right? This is all about roles. Volunteer burnout is a real thing. Volunteers having bad communication, volunteers signing up for one thing, kind of a bait and switch, that people get their feelings hurt, and it's a legitimate reason to feel uncomfortable, right? What am I signing up for? People have got to know what they're signing up for. If I'm asking you to volunteer for an event, you need to know who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? You need to have some information, and so I've got to help people understand what they're signing up for. I need a healthy system to appreciate and communicate with my people, right? I've got to have a comm tree that works where I can communicate with the right people for the right problems, right? So I'm not stealing time from the wrong person, right? Where I'm getting the right person in the right conversation. If I'm drawing somebody away from their task to do a task that really isn't, like, it's not their responsibility, it's not their role, and there is somebody else who's supposed to do it. If I start hitting David up about the COVID protocols, well, now I'm wasting his time when he's supposed to be at work. I'm stealing his resource, and I'm not using the person who volunteered for it and wants to be doing it. And so I've cut her out of what she's called to. I'm wasting his resources, and now volunteers are being misused on both sides. And so I've got to have a healthy way to communicate. I've got to have a healthy way to appreciate, right? Whatever our task is, large or small, we're doing it for the glory of God. I don't think any of us are doing it for a pat on the back, but at the same time, being acknowledged. Like, Pastor Darrell does a ton of printing. Pastor Darrell does a ton of creative work to help things happen. I appreciate that. I absolutely appreciate that. And as a team, we can see, if we understand our roles, that there are a dozen people that are filling roles that I don't have to fill to make Sunday morning go. I appreciate that. Imagine if you had to do it all. It'd be brutal. And so a clear method to be able to appreciate and communicate is critical. And then we've got to be realistic and honest about our time commitments. As we're asking volunteers to fit into jobs, because fundamentally that's what it is. We won't call it that. We don't actually see it that way. But in reality, we're asking them to do a job. We've got to be realistic and honest about the time commitments associated. If it's a 2-hour task, it's a 2-hour task. If it's a 10-hour task, it's a 10-hour task. If it's a 10-hour task and I tell them it's a 2-hour task, if I tell them it's a 2-hour task because I didn't plan it right, it turns out to be a 10-hour task. It's a problem, y'all. It's a reality, y'all. The key takeaway, the real key to all of this, is that the church's resources don't end at the offering plate. If I wasted tithe funds, we would consider that an abomination, wouldn't we? If I stole tithe funds, we would consider that an abomination. If I mishandled tithe funds, that would be awful, right? Do I treat the other resources that God has poured into this church with the same sensitivity that I treat money? I've made a conscious decision, as I have worked in leadership, as I have ministered here, to have absolutely nothing to do with money. I don't want to hold the offering basket. I don't even want to know who accounts for the money. I want my interaction with counsel to be a request for a specific denomination, for a specific task. I don't want to handle the money. I have handled people's time and people's talent. I don't know if I have managed my handling of people's time and talent with the same reverence that I've handled mine. I don't even want to, I so don't want to be associated with a monetary error or mistake that I don't even want to touch it. I don't know that I have approached time and talent with the same sensitivity. I think every single one of us are sensitive to money, at least in a similar way. Some of you may not be quite as averse to it as I am, but I think every single one of us views the tithes and the offerings offered in this church with reverence. I'm not messing with that. Churches have problems all over the world over money. We're not going to have that here. But do we treat the other resources with the same respect and care? I hope that we do. All right. Time and talent are resources that God has given us. I think we need to account for them the same way that we account for money. Leadership is how that gets done. Good scheduling, good planning, good leading stewards time and talent, just like good fiscal responsibility stewards money. We got a council, and you can make a spreadsheet to track the monetary portion of this conversation. Time and talent are much more nuanced. And so we've got to be critical in our leadership stuff, right? We just went through a dozen points or 10 points or whatever. All of that drives at, and I apologize if it's been boring, all of that drives at stewarding time and talent with the same respect that we steward finances, okay? That's where I want us to get to, okay? So for our exercise this week, this plays out a little bit further than just the exercise, okay? For the exercise this week, I would like you all to consider working on a tweetable job description. All right, this does a couple of things. If we all do this, I can hand these over to Pastor Pio, and he can get a concept of how we see the roles that we fill, right? It helps him organize to conceptualize his organization, to truly appreciate what are the people doing that are filling these slots. I have a feeling that we do some things that he might not even know we do, right? This isn't about recognition. This is about truly conceptualizing what does this organization require to do what this organization does, all right? And so what I'd like you to think about is you make this job description, this position description, I would ask you to consider, what do you think you agreed to? What did you, in your mind, agree to? And how does that compare to what you actually do, right? That's an important nuance. That's an important thing to capture. I think I signed on for this. I also do these other things. Or I signed on for this, and then I realized these are sort of what we call them implied tasks in the Marine Corps, right? If I say you need to show up at you need to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, the implied task is that you'll be shaved, that you'll have the right haircut, that you'll be in the right uniform, that these things come with it. So with all of our roles and responsibilities, there are implied tasks that aren't necessarily spelled out in the job title, right? And so there are adjacent tasks, things that sort of get piled onto us, and then there are implied tasks that are directly part of what we're responsible for, right? If I'm doing maintenance around the church, an implied task is probably going to be getting maintenance supplies, right? And so I'm going to have to coordinate with the council to be able to, and so these are additional tasks that need to be recognized as a part of the job description. I'd ask you to consider the time. Realistically, how much time does your commitment take? That's an important thing, because if you're to be replaced, we've got to be honest. If it's a 2-hour task, it's a 2-hour task. If it's a 10-hour task and it gets pitched as a 2-hour task, there's about 8 hours of hurt feelings on that, right? There's 8 hours of mismanaged time. There's 8 hours of poorly managed talent. Can I get $8 of poorly managed funds out of the offering plate? Anybody? Never. Get the heck out of here with that, right? I'm not going to get 8 hours of mismanaged time, right? If we treat it with the same respect. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of your job, of your role, of your responsibility, and how does it line to the mission? We got to have it clearly in our minds and clearly understood that the mission is about making disciples and sharing the gospel. So whatever I do, this class has got to draw a clear thread to the mission. If it doesn't, then my talent has been mismanaged. Can I get an hour and 10 minutes of mismanaged time? Can I get $20 of mismanaged money? No. Right? What's the contribution to the mission? That's what I really want us to drive at, right? So what did you agree to? What did you find out comes with the agreement? What time is actually associated with what you do? What purpose? What's the contribution to the mission? How does it help it out? All right. If you open up the exercise in the classroom, you'll see I explained it in a little bit more depth. You can build it out any way you like. Reply it as a message. Make it bullets. Whatever however you want to frame it. But I would ask you to put a little bit of time into that. I think that this is an exercise that is fruitful far beyond this class. I think some of the exercises have absolutely been fruitful within the class. I think some of the exercises will absolutely have will bear fruit in other, as you all apply your areas of ministry. This particular exercise really will feed into the organization to help conceptualize and help clean up aspects of the organization that are not working right? If there is a task that exists that we didn't even really consider exists, then maybe we can find the right person to do that, right? If there is some task that's being satisfied, man, I just really need some help on this, right? If we can take the time and identify that, then maybe we can find the right place to push talent and time, right? I don't want to mismanage anybody's time. I don't want to see anybody's time, talent, or treasure mismanaged. It is. I think that it is an abuse. I just got done preaching it for the tithe message today. It's not just, we are pouring out of our abundance. And so whatever abundance you are pouring out of, I wish to treat it with the same integrity that I mean to treat your money as well. All right? And so please go into the exercise with that mindset. All right? Questions?
So when I look at stuff, I think of myself like that sometimes there's an abundance that you have, but they really only want this much.
Ah.
And that's what's happening a lot. It's only this much, but we have all this. But so after a while, I have to go somewhere else to get the abundance, right? Because I want more inflow. So I got it. So that's the thing is that in this room alone, amazing talent, amazing hospitality, gifting, drives, everything. And yet we're still living like this. Like this is just my opinion. When we come here and I see this whole list, and I'm just seeing that we want to pour out abundance, but we only have this, And I am talking, sit down, sorry. So it's hard for me to put it on paper because I feel like I'm giving it into a place where they only want this much of me. And I think most of us are very diverse in talent. We can do a lot of things only because we've had a lot of experience. But yet, we're here. I got all this to give. And yet, I'm just saying, and it is very frustrating. And so, for me, I want us to be here, and then, or like this, and then I can give this much. And then, so at least I can have some place to give this much, so.
What would it look like? How could we give this much?
I think, like how you had those charts. I think the charts, that other chart you had, where you had the senior pastor.
This guy.
Yeah. And so, honestly, for me, if I have a group of leaders, I want to know what is your specialty.
Yeah.
Bring that to the table. I don't want you to bring anything else because I want the best from you. And for me, and then entrust that totally to just that.
Decision rights.
Right? Exactly. So I don't want to micromanage when they have the expertise. There's a lot of things we have lots of experience in that I have, and to see it, have all this experience, and it's got to fit in this tiny box. And I think our growth will come just like how we have our gifting test, right? A lot of times we have a lot of people with a lot of gifts all in the wrong place.
Right.
And so now it's like you come with an abundance, and I'm like, what? I gotta fit that in here, And so I would like to see us like this, and then me bring my this and fit it in there,
Right.
easier versus having all this. And to me, I feel like that's not honoring God. Like for me, I feel go big, go home. This is just my take on ministry, my take on loving God. That's why I always shout, I always praise, because I want to give the best to God, whatever I have. And I may not have financial things like most people do, but I have great resources. I have great people that I tap into to get what I need because I feel like God has given that to us. So I would like to see us like this, and then us bring our abundance, everybody, and then eventually it'll be like, and so yeah. So for me, I do love the concept, but I want to be able to say, if you're gonna trust me all the way. I can't think like you because I'm operating out of a place of hospitality. But if you want me to do it just like that, it's gonna be hard because then now, it's gonna strip me of vision. It's gonna strip me of excitement. Strip me of all these things.
I think the place that I would challenge you is, and I think that you personally can pull things off. But I think that without leadership skills, you're going to have to pull them off by yourself. Because you can't get people to help. You can't get those I can't gather those other resources to me in time if I don't have the leadership skills to bring them on board. So it's like then I require that I have a team that's just sitting ready to do tasks as assigned, which doesn't work in a volunteer organization. And so I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that given no other responsibilities and no other financial restraints, I think we could show up here every day and work towards the next big thing. Everybody just ready to run in their individual calling. The thing is that we don't have that luxury because we're using volunteer time and talent to pull these things off. So I don't disagree with your vision and your desire. And the point in discussing the matters of leadership and scheduling and all of that is not at the expense of creativity, is not at the expense of freedom in worship and outpouring from the gifts that we are given. It's in reverence and respect for the limitations that the people that we mean to lead have on their lives. And that's the tough part. The things this is something I've really had to wrestle through with my Marines, okay? I tend to be a very, very capable Marine. So physically, intellectually, soldiering skills wise, I am a very, very capable Marine. If that becomes the standard by which I measure all of my Marines, then they have to live up to everything that I've done, which is unfair to them. I have to be realistic about their individual potential. And so I've got guys that are incredibly fast runners. I've got guys who are excellent shots. I've got guys who are completely fearless, fantastic swimmers. But they're not they're not all in the same person. Right? And so you are that person who has all of these powerful talents, all of these fruitful, useful skills. But if you're not going to do it by yourself, then we have to bring other people in to pull these things off, to make these ideas, these creative expressions that you've designed come to fruition. Because those people have limitations on them. I've got to be able to do these other things. So it's not meant to be like, Roz, you got to chill out, sis. The point is for us to appreciate we all have vast talents, but if I'm going to bring people along with me, I've got to understand and appreciate their individual limitations.
Oh yeah, this is not my box. So if they bring the abundance, they bring that abundance, whatever abundance they have. I'm not saying they gotta follow my footsteps. Definitely not what I want to say. I'm not trying to take Pastor Daryl's place in workshop or anything. I just want to do what God has called me to do.
Yeah.
I love hospitality. I love evangelizing. That's my thing. And so I would like to see all of us bring your thing. Bring your thing, the best you can bring. Just bring it. And the thing is, but there is, there is not a whole lot of stuff we're doing right now. According to the abundance that we have, right? The giftings that we have. We're very limited in what we're allowed to do. So that's where there's a frustration that comes in, right? It does. It starts to strip your vision. It starts to get lazy. It starts to get lax. We started off with the Kingdom Kids having a lot of volunteers not too long ago. And then now as time goes on, it gets less and less, and because people are starting to occupy somewhere else. And I would like to see us all bring that abundance back. Like, I'm not saying all in the same way, the same,
Yeah.
I'm doing my thing, you bring your abundance back from your thing.
I think we've got a great time to plan right now. Because I think that the restrictions are about to bust.
Yay!
I think that's coming very, very soon. The islands are doing fantastic. I think we're in a key time right now to plan for what happens when it busts. So we can absolutely be ready, and the time for planning is now. So then we can execute when it goes. I think that's how I guess what I would submit to you is that's how we capitalize on what we have right now. Because we're limited legally on some things, and rationally, I think it's right to be limited on some things right now. That doesn't mean, so that means that we're safe here to plan and to strategize and to have great ideas put together and ready to roll as soon as the state gives us the go-ahead. And so that's how I think, I would submit to you, that's a great way for us to leverage the stuff that we're talking about right now in order to make it possible for everybody to work out of that abundance when we have the opportunity to do it. I think that I agree with you wholeheartedly on all of your points. Right now, I think we plan it, and then we can execute it excellently in a month or two. Other thoughts?
What if we use, everyone kind of leader over some kind of ministry here. What if we use our separate ministry in doing that homework or that, if I got to write out something about men's group, how can I get a volunteer to get involved and do what you call it, job description?
That's great.
Is that what you kind of tell us to do?
Yeah.
Homework?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way.
Our own ministry and
100%. Yeah, I absolutely meant for your specific ministry. Yeah. As for the exercise, absolutely. The specific thing that Jen does, the specific thing that Charles does, the specific thing that you do. Then, so basically, everybody's job description would look slightly different, right? Well, would look different because everybody's responsible for different roles. And then there will be places where there are overlap. And then there will be places where, like, okay, so this one is completely over here, and this one is completely over here. But yeah, it's absolutely meant to be over what you specifically do to help conceptualize the structure better. Right. Drawing that thread between what you do and the mission. Anything else? All right. Heavenly Father, we praise you, Lord. We wish to serve you out of abundant hearts. We wish to just only to worship you with all that you have given to us. And so, Father, we praise you. We love you. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for changing our hearts and making us new. In Jesus' powerful name I pray. Amen.